There's going to be a major step change, both in terms of journalism itself and in terms of regulation. The complaints work that the PCC presently does is valued, but it's quite obvious from what's been given as evidence to Leveson that it's not enough. There will need to be a new standards body with tough powers, the power to investigate, to deal with the big issues, cases like Chris Jeffries, the McCanns, Dowlers, Watsons, and to make sure that such things don't occur again. Another aspect that's likely to occur, because Lord Justice Leveson himself has expressed an interest in this area, is an arbitral arm, which will be able to intervene early in defamation cases in a much more cost-effective way. That will be an attractive option to newspapers, and it will also save the public a great deal of money and cost in taking out defamation cases to law. So I think what's likely to emerge is a three-arm structure. Complaints pretty much along the lines that the PCC presently operates, standards, which will be a tough new regulator, and finally an arbitral arm which will deal with defamation cases.
But to make it an effective regulator, I think it does have to be set up by statute in order to make it work. I certainly don't think that the precise detail of the rules or how it will work should be dealt with by statute. The regulator should deal with that, but the setting up of the regulator, I think, does have to be done by statute. Otherwise, you end up with a contractual arrangement between the regulator and the newspapers.
Well, I think it should be still self-regulating. I think that should be the ethos, and we shouldn't forget that by a very wide margin, the countries that have the freest press in the world have a self-regulating structure. You can argue about how you arrive at it and how you get people to do things out of that to be more effective and more trusted than the PCC has been recently. But I wouldn't let go of that principle.
The only way the system will begin to work is when a new regulatory authority can give claimants proper redress. So the new body's got to have power. It must not, on the other hand, be either government controlled or appointed. It's got to be an entirely independent body. But that independent body may have to be set up by statute, like the Bar Council or Bar, I can't remember exactly which part of the Bar Council actually controls barristers and the way they behave, but equally the Law Society is a statutory body. And I believe you can set up a statutory body without the government having any ability to control it or influence it or anything else.
Well, it's certainly extremely broad, and it covers issues of culture and taste as much as anything else, which are quite difficult issues anyway. But he's got a massive job, because some of the issues, such as the relationship between the media and the police, is quite important. The relationship between the media and government is important. So there is some scope for slimming down the scope of it.
I think the problem is that David Cameron panicked at the beginning, not least because he had some involvement with some of the key players in the hacking saga. And so we got this very broad remit, which was culture, ethics and practice of the press. And one thing I've been saying is any professional group, if subjected to a sweeping inquiry into all of these three things in the public gaze, is not going to look too good. And I think what's more important is to focus on what's gone wrong, what you can put right, and how you can still have a vibrant and unconstrained press at the end of it to do the good things without obviously repeating some of the mistakes of the past.
And I have to say, I think it would have been better if Leveson had been given a narrower remit dealing with future press regulation, the future of the PCC, and to some extent practices. But I think, folding it over into relations with the police and politicians and everything else has broadened it out probably a little bit too far and actually given him a harder task than he need have.
there is such a thing as public interest, but it will be variously viewed. I don't believe, as someone, I think Hugh Grant said at Leveson, that it's absolutely clear what a public interest is. I think what is public interest to a Guardian reader might be slightly different to public interest to a Sun reader. These are very variable categories, and that's even looking at things that you can justify before we get into things that we say is just what interests the public.
But ultimately, it's still going to be a subjective area of whatever is codified, and decisions are going to have to be taken by individuals or groups as to whether something was in the public interest or it wasn't. So all everyone can do really is collaborate and work together and try and come up with a shared definition of what the public interest is.
I doubt Leveson is going to be able to do much about the public interest. I mean, the public interest defence, there's one in the DPA, as I said this evening, there's not one in many other statutes, and it's specifically not in things like the Official Secrets Act, Computer Misuse Act, etc. I doubt Lord Justice Leveson is going to be able to affect that.